Well, good Monday morning. It's actually Friday afternoon. I should note it is Alex's birthday today. He's the birthday boy. So how old are you, Alex, today?
I'm 33 years old. 33.
Okay, right. Been doing mortgages since you're 25, 6? How old are
Oh,
you? Sorry.
25, 26, 2017.
Yep.
It's definitely making me feel old now. I've been through like two waves. I feel like I've been in the like 2017 to 19. I went in the 2020 to 2023 wave, and now I'm in a new, and I'm hitting multiple markets. I feel like that are different. So it makes
Yeah.
me feel old.
It does change a lot. It makes you making you more of a veteran instead of a rookie. So happy birthday. Just want to make sure everybody realizes it's Alex's birthday. So we'll talk a little bit about rates today, but I just had to put in my 2 cents worth too about affordability. It's something that is obviously a buzzword right this minute. And they're just things I think sometimes maybe we're missing that we could talk about to make houses more affordable, or maybe what drives affordability and what consumers are really saying about maybe inflation and stuff. So we thought we'd just talk about that a little bit, and that's part of our commentary. You can read about it, or you can listen to us a little bit pontification here on the number one mortgage cast on the Eastern North Carolina for mortgage, because
Podcast, me too.
yeah, podcast. That's right, because nobody else does one. That makes us number one. So, but that's okay. We still are number one. But we usually talk a little bit about rates in our PDF and our commentary. And I think it's worth mentioning this week about rates because there was a lot of volatility of rates around the tariffs and the economic of, Greenland and all this other stuff. And I just think it's worth noting that one, the mortgage market really did not overreact. Rates stayed pretty steady throughout the week, the 7 or 8 day upheaval over Greenland, so to speak. But the Treasury market did not. And the Treasury market went from a yield that was declining, getting hopefully closer to 4%. It was about 4.15 when this discussion started really heating up. And it got as high as 4.295, almost 4.3 up, up what's a little bit more than an eighth in rate as we measure it in mortgage terms. And also, the last time rates were at 4.3 roughly, rates were higher. And so mortgage lenders really want business right this minute. I think you can see that by the fact that they didn't overreact to this. They also are narrowing their profit margin or their spreads as a result of the daily activity within the treasury markets, which do change for mortgage rates too. And so my real thought is, too, is don't be too complacent if you think rates are going to continue to fall. You're really trying to do something. If treasuries stay where they are, they ended up this week at like 4.25 today. So I would tell you to not bet too much on them falling in the next few weeks. In other words.
Yeah. Yeah. But for my
And
soapbox, I couldn't agree more with what Drew's saying. I think my last point, just to kind of add on or give like a real life specific scenario, I quoted somebody before the week started, which was before the tariff news, because the tariff news happened over the weekend,
right.
right?
It
So
really,
I'm getting Wall Street Journal, pop ups about tariffs, and I quoted somebody on Friday, and I was like, well, that's not great. I quoted them on Friday. They're not locked. And I'm trying to also narrow down their lock time frame because lenders can have a little bit better pricing when the lock is not for longer than 30 days or 35 days. When you lock for 60 or 90, sometimes that can cause, not always, but it's more likely that'll cause a premium in the lock. So, I was trying to wait for the lock time frame to be a little bit lower. And so I quoted them on Thursday, Friday. I see the tariff news. I'm like, I might have to requote that. I go through the whole week.
and we're
It's
trying our best to get the customer the best rate watching this
exactly.
stuff. Makes us not sleep at night sometimes.
Yeah. And like Drew's saying, we're watching that ticker. The TNX is what he's referring to. That goes from 4.1 to 4.2, which isn't really a significant move in my opinion, but it is a move where it could cause, instead of, getting a rate of like 6%, it might cause the rate to be 6 and 8. It's not a drastic move, but it is, people are sensitive to price. No one wants you to call them back and say, hey, sorry, the price is higher than we thought it was. So you're really trying to maneuver that price around as much as you can. And I was actually able to honor the same, even though I really didn't have a lot of ability to offer like a different pricing concession. But I actually, from the Friday quote to where I just locked it today, my concession only changed by like, which concession being like how much we as the lender are willing to waive. It only changed between a quarter and an eighth in fee or in points. In the big scheme of things, if you're only changing by an eighth or a quarter in fee at points, that's not a big change for given how much the 10-year moved this week. And so it just echoes Drew's point that the 10-year, the treasury market really had some more volatility, but the lenders or the banks, they're really trying to keep their margins tight and be able to help consumers get the lowest rate possible, which is a little surprising. Usually they're a little bit more greedy.
Not necessarily the banks. These are mortgage companies too. Mortgage companies really do control the mortgage market, not the banks so much. So that's another whole topic about who's really controlling the mortgage market, banks or mortgage companies. But so
we anyway, want to talk about a good topic.
Enough of that minutia about rates and stuff.
Yeah,
I think people can get glassed over on that kind of topic real quick. But really, I want to talk a few minutes about affordability, and what I think are really some of the bigger drivers to it. Alex and I talk about, wow, we can't believe the house is selling for this price. Sometimes we think it's a good price. Sometimes we think it's too much. But, we have to keep our mouths shut. But we look and see prices all the time. The consumer and the people involved, they get to decide what they want to pay. And I mean, we don't look at the prices and go, wow, that's more or less higher or lower than we really think maybe the price should be. And so, we think about affordability, and, the first thing is that, a house a few years ago that cost, $450, for example, honestly, if you bought a house in 2019 before COVID for $450, it could easily be worth $900,000 today. Do you disagree, Alex?
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's double. It's not just 50% more, it's 100% more. It's 450 times 2. To me, that's 100% more. And, what's really driving it, other than obviously we had inflation that drove it through that period, but now, of course, they're still up there. And really, I think what consumers really want more than anything else, the people who don't own homes, okay, is they want lower prices. They really don't want just, better rates. And honestly, we can lower rates and not really accomplish that much. Rates by themselves will not get us there. And
I think we're seeing that a little bit because they're down a whole point and it's not getting us a lot of momentum in markets at the end of the day.
And the other part is, if you look at the industry of housing, especially off the Outer Banks, the big builders, the Plutes, the Lennars, the Toll Brothers, the other companies that are out there, they're offering rates of sub 5%, 4.99 is easily obtainable in the first-time home buyer market in the big cities in these markets. But the houses are, too expensive, and the buyers just are like, I don't want to buy a $600,000 house or an $800,000 house. It's not. The real problem is in affordability is for first-time home buyers, and there's very little under $600,000, but the builders just aren't moving these properties, so they don't want to build. They're actually building less, not helping the inventory issue, which I think is really the biggest problem, is lack of inventory. I mean, if you look at the beach, I don't think the inventory on the Outer Banks is high. I think it's a little low. It's certainly low in certain areas. It's higher in others. But I really think the answer to affordability, unfortunately, to a degree for homeowners, is to get lower prices. And to get lower prices, we need more inventory, but we don't necessarily need the builders to, quote, build more. This is just me talking. We need more houses on the market that people own. There are too many people that are locked in their house that won't move because interest rates are high. They don't want to sell and go buy another house that's the same price. They may feel like they're getting almost an inferior house over what they have, and they don't want to borrow money at these rates. Rates are important, but it's not the same thing. So how do we unstick the market? What are some of my ideas to unstick the market that you don't hear about it? Ways to increase inventory, so to speak. And my biggest sort of thing I'm going to play into today is we used to have an unlimited amount of capital gain that was not taxed if you sold your primary residence.
When
So
did
in
that
other words,
change? When did that change, Drew?
um, sometime probably around the late 90s or maybe the early 2000s. I
Okay.
can't really remember when it changed. It's been changed for a long time where there was a cap. In other words, if you sold your home today for $1 million and you paid, $300,000 for it, it's not unheard of. You'll make $700,000. Today, that is sheltered, but not 100%. You would pay
Yeah.
a capital gain on anything above $500,000. So $500,000 is sheltered, and that's a lot. But if you bought a house, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and I bought my house 25 years ago that I live in. I mean, you bought your house right before COVID, really,
Yeah.
so if you've got a big capital gain that you might have to pay taxes on and exceed $500,000, you're keeping houses off the market. The other part is the biggest group of people that own houses that need to get rid of them are baby boomers. And the baby boomer generation, that's me, people that are roughly 62, 3 is like the youngest.
Yeah.
I'm a young baby boomer. Most baby boomers are older than I am, have already hit their 70s, and the baby boomer generation runs for about 20 years. So people in their 80s are boomers, which is hard to believe when I'm a boomer and I remember they're so much younger. But the bottom line is this group, especially the latter part, the late 70s and mid 70s people, they really want to move on, but they don't want to pay capital gains. And they have more capital gains than $500,000 that allow limits. And so what they're doing, they're hanging onto their property. They're not selling it because they know if they die, they can pass it to their kids tax-free. The basis gets stepped up to the property's worth, $1 million today. Their cost basis was only $200,000 or $300,000. The parents, when they become deceased, automatically give it to the children, and the children then have a basis like the parents did that was at $200,000 or $300,000 of $1 million. This is what the government allows. This is what is called stepped up basis, and it's keeping a lot of houses off the market from the boomer generation to sell them because they're like, well, I don't really need to sell my house. A lot of boomers are pretty wealthy. It's certainly a large cohort of talk about the transfer of wealth from boomers to the lower next generation. And this is really a way to accelerate it, is to get rid of the taxing of capital gains on the sale of a house. That's my first idea.
So hold on one second. Let me backtrack just to make sure I give concrete kind of taxable examples. Is that so? If your parents bought a house for $300,000 and they sold it for $1 million, right? $500,000 is tax free,
right?
And then the other remaining amount of money would be taxed.
That's right.
After $500,000.
That's right.
Right.
At some rate of 20% or give or take more. It's a capital gain, so it's not an income tax.
Right. So
but you pay it both you can pay it both at the state level. Say North Carolina treats capital gain like regular income, so they tax it at 4 or 5%. The state of the country, the USA, the federal government may cap it as a capital gains tax, but that's another 20%. So 25% wouldn't be unheard of. You would just lose.
Right, and that would be on after the $500,000. Anything above that is what's taxed.
That's right.
Now, when it comes to, let's say the parent bought the house for $300,000, they pass. It's now worth $1 million. The inheritance of most likely kids or whoever inherited the property sells the property for $1.2 million. They're only taxed on $200,000. They're not taxed on as if they bought it for $300,000. So for the audience, that's why Drew is saying that essentially the parents in this situation, they don't want to sell the property before they pass because then they're going to pay capital gains over $500,000 versus if it's inherited by the kids or whoever inherits the property, then they're only paying taxes on a much, much smaller amount. And it just seems like a no-brainer not to sell your property for that boomer generation who holds most of the world's wealth. Most of the world's wealth
Just
is
think
that
about
older
it this way,
generation.
too. If you only have one child, if you're a single child, you inherit the property. This is their example. You inherit it, the tax basis becomes $1 million. You don't sell it for a couple of years. You sell it a year from now or 2 years from now. You do sell for $1.2 million. That's not taxable because your basis was $1 million. So if you lived in it, you still got a 500. If you treated it as a primary for 2 years, you would have gains on the $200,000 in your example.
Wow.
You do have to treat it like a primary. You can't have it supposed to live there, and you'd have to show documentation. And the rule has always been you had to live there for 2 years before you were eligible for any tax deduction or elimination of capital gains tax. But it really just ought to be raised to a bigger number, a much bigger. And I know it's somewhat of a giveaway to other wealthy people, but it also, the point is, if you remember the point of my conversation, I'm trying to push prices down.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to really help homeowners in this conversation because I want people to flood the market with property to bring it down. I think that's one of the solutions is to get existing owners to sell property. And this is one way to do that. If you increase inventory, prices will come down. The other part of this capital gains equation is before we had a capital gains tax at all, we used to have zero on property sale for primary residence. We would see people intentionally buy a house, build it, live there for 2 years, the required time, sell it, go buy another house, and do it. It wasn't required that you had to spend all the money. You couldn't pocket the money, okay? You had to buy a house of greater or equal value. And so people kept buying nicer homes, which was a nice way for them to build wealth and move up to get to the house they needed as they had kids. And people would sell houses and to go do that. And guess what they did? They built the next one. And so when they built the next one, they added inventory. So it doubles inventory, another way to add inventory by lowering the tax on primary residence sales. So that's big one that's not being talked about and one that I really like. I do think that lower rates would help. If we get a combination of people putting houses on the market to avoid capital gains and lower rates, and maybe a lighter regulatory burden and getting builders to build houses. If we figure out a way to lower the cost to build houses too, that would be helpful. We have a few regulatory burdens, not just around zoning, but also around, cost to build a house. I'm sure builders could expound on that about the cost that they could see that could be eliminated of building a house. But so those are really sort of my ideas. My outlandish idea, I think Alex may or may not like this one, is that I generally don't like subsidies. Because I think subsidies will help you create desires for houses with not increase in inventory, and therefore the prices keep going up because you have some type of subsidy to help people buy houses. For example, I'm not a big fan of saying let's give everybody $25,000 to go buy a house, because if you do that, then more people want to go buy houses, but inventory hadn't increased. We got to get inventory back on the market. It can't be just the builders doing it. It has to be from people that own houses, selling them and increasing listings. So the other idea, though, I do like is a subsidy, and this is a way I feel like to really help first-time home buyers is to say, we have FHA and VA loans that are basically government programs for first-time home buyers. VA is for veterans. They've served the country and they get a benefit of 100% financing because they're veterans. The FHA is a program where you put 3.5% down as a first-time home buyer and get a traditional 30-year fixed rate. It just is a low down payment. I think we should do 100% financing for borrowers who will take out a 15-year fixed. And so if you'll agree to take a 15-year fixed and keep it for 5 years, you'll build a lot of equity in your house. You'll have it a third paid off. The idea of the 30-year mortgage is great to lower payments, but you really, in reality, never get the house paid for forever. If you put people in 15-year mortgages, they'll have instant equity in a short period of time. They don't really need to put money down because they're building equity from day one with the higher payments. And in 15 years, there'll be people that own the property. And we already have rates with these government programs that are better than traditional conventional. Traditional conventional, we know, is around 6% today. Government programs might be 5.5 or 5.3. There's no reason a 15-year fixed rate, which would already be lower today, if you did a government 15-year fixed or a conventional 30-year fixed, 15-year fixed, wouldn't be as low as possibly 4.5%. That's a pretty low rate, an incentive to get the 15-year fixed rate, and it's 100% financing. If we do that, I think not only do we help consumers own houses quicker and get them paid off, we help first-time home buyers own their property and create real wealth. I mean, if you buy a house when you're 30, you pay it off when you're 45, you can go buy another house as an investment at that point. Or you can buy a bigger house, or you can turn this one into a rental property and buy your next property at 45. The other part is builders will build houses that will end up being affordable with the 15-year mortgage because they know the government's subsidizing this product and consumers will want it.
Yeah.
That's my second point. And one I've actually always loved 15-year mortgages. I don't talk about them a lot right now because prices are so high and rates have been attractive. And so people don't tend to like them. And a lot of financial advisors tell you to get 30-year mortgages and things of that nature and invest the difference. But the problem is people don't invest the difference. They just spend it.
Yeah, I think I personally, like you said, like even with the VA or especially with just 100% financing, I see it as a little bit of a gamble for the owner because, it's just common that people need to move or have a reason to sell in 2 to 3 years. They financed 100%. They basically are selling the property a lot of times for relatively what they bought it for. And then they're actually, by the time they pay all the commissions and fees to sell the property, they actually have to come up with money when they sell the house rather than make money. And it just puts people in a precarious position because, if you bought a house for $400 and then sold it for $400 and you got to pay $10,000 in fees to sell it, maybe some people like this don't have $10,000 just laying around to actually sell the property. And it just,
so let me ask you a question. How just say somebody that you're worried that you're essentially saying the downside of the 15-year idea, 100% financing, is that they aren't going to have enough equity if they need to sell the house in 3 years, 5 years? What time period would you want there to use?
2 to 3 years. It's not, I would use 2 to 3
Let's
years.
Use 3 years.
If they sell the house in 2 to
3. In 3 years, if you take a 15-year mortgage on a $400,000 mortgage, at the end of the 36th month on a $400,000 mortgage, you owe $339,000. You got $60,000 worth of equity. You got to sell it, hopefully for more. You're going to sell it for more, hopefully. If you don't sell it for more, you have to sell it for what you bought it for because you need to move on and go to another city because your job or whatever. You got enough equity in there to sell it.
Yeah, I'm used to seeing, I guess, on the 30 year. On the 30 year, it's more. I know it's on a 15 year. You're suggesting on a. I get your point. I'm more when I see it in real life, in real time. There are 30-year fixes, and so that's where I get more concerned. Of course, you're suggesting a 15-year fix, more principal is paid, and therefore you're saying, well, because they're paying more principal, when they do sell it, they won't have to pay any fees if they sell it for the same price or relatively.
In the 36 months, if they borrowed the same $400,000 and they had a higher rate, they would have a higher rate because it's not going to be 15-year rates have always been lower. So let's just say they get a rate of 5.75%. They're going to owe at the end of 3 years $384,000. They only pay $15,000 in principal. With this subsidized idea that I've got here for 15-year fixed, they owe, what did I say, $339,000, $60,000. It's a lot. You'd have $60,000 of equity versus 15 in just 3 years. The people will never walk out of their house because they won't want to sell it because they got so much equity. I mean, and they won't want to default because they're looking at their balance every month. It's just going down. We really ought to get people to think about ownership 100% without having a mortgage at some point.
It's an idea. It's just not my favorite idea. But yeah, I do agree with the other idea, though. I think the other idea is a really great idea because at the end of the day, when that inherited family member inherits the property, the likelihood that inherited family member sells is within 1 to 2 years is really high. And so all you're doing by removing the capital gains tax is just allowing that process to get moving quicker and bringing more houses to market versus people waiting and then eventually they get sold. The person.
I think both ideas are really great because I do think that you're actually going to give people that are wealthy a pretty big tax break. So that's a little bit of concern. The other with the 15-year fixed, one, builders are going to start building houses that people can afford on a 15-year mortgages. They'll just do it. That's what builders do. They go where the money is. If they think they can build a cheaper, smaller house and get somebody to sell, but if they build more small houses, and we honestly build big houses today. I mean, people weren't used to.
Well, we have so much more. We have so much more amenities too in that versus the 80s versus the 2000s. Yeah. The amenities of a home are vastly different. We're not even in 2025 in that example.
I mean, most of the houses, like in downtown Mania, for example, that were built in the 50s, are probably 1,800, maybe even 1,500 square feet. They're basically 2 and 3 bedroom bungalow things with bedrooms up top that are not big. A nice living area downstairs. They are nice. They got hardwood floors and stuff like that, but they're not expensive. And those homes we built post World War II were probably selling for, I don't know, 20 grand, maybe like 12 or 15 grand when they were first built. And that's what builders would do. They go back to say, hey, we got this thing that we can build them, get people in houses. They would go back and try to figure out a way to build more affordable homes.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it helps. Well, and also, you've helped wealthy people, and I think you're really helping first-time home buyers with the 15-year idea.
Gotcha. So, all right. Well,
that's about 20 minutes. That's probably enough for this week for y'all to listen to. We'd love to have you read our. If you want to read it, you can read it. The PDF's attached. We'd love you to subscribe to our channel, and we hope you come back next week.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for your time.
All right. Thanks a lot.